is the 8th chapter of Quran. Anfal means spoils of war. For thousands of years, primitive tribes raided and plundered each other. The more savage societies also looted the wives and children of the vanquished. Women were often raped and children were enslaved and sold. During Prophet Muhammad's era, the Arab Bedouin people did plenty of raiding and looting to each other. That was their way of life. For months during the year they abstained from fighting, when war was regarded as sacrilege. These were called sacred months, which are Muharram, Zulhijjah, Zulqa'dah, and Rajab. You can find a mention of them in the Quran Surah At-Tawbah, verse 5. Outside these months they were free to raid and loot one another. There was no central power to punish the aggressors. When Prophet Muhammad migrated to Medina, his followers who migrated with him were mostly slaves and disaffected youths. They were destitute. The Prophet continued the tradition of the Bedouins and told them,
"Steal the infidels for your sustenance."
Their morality was so low that no one objected to a prophet of Allah engaging in thuggery.
Why should we object the prophet? Isn't it obvious that he was very successful in defeating his enemies because of the divine assistance?
Yes, that's a clear proof for us.
Primitive people think might is right. You can often find this kind of primitive thinking in children. I was about 10 when our teacher in one of the small towns in Iran said,
"We will go swimming next week."
We were excited and looked forward to it. When the promised day came, we had brought our shorts and towels and were getting ready to a day of fun. There were a couple of students in our class who were Baha'i or Jew.
"You both cannot come. You are Kafiran, therefore you can't be in the same pool with us Muslims."
I can't forget the disappointment and sadness of those kids. That was a clear injustice, but as a 10-year-old child I was unable to see this as such. I felt sad, but I thought it is the kids' fault for not being Muslim. My sense of morality had not been evolved enough to see things clearly. I blamed the victims. In a society where everyone thinks like you, you get validation from others and your distorted thinking is confirmed. Our thoughts must be challenged in order to evolve. For centuries, Islam was not challenged because Muslims killed anyone who dared to criticize or question Islam. But internet technology allows people to criticize and challenge Islam's ideology without losing their lives. These criticisms help Muslims to evaluate their faith objectively and their understanding will evolve. When Muhammad raided the caravans and the villages of the Arabs, massacred unarmed populations and plundered their belongings, enslaved their women and children, not only his followers, but also other Arabs did not see this as something utterly evil. The more he succeeded in his raids or ghazwa, as he called them, the more popular he became. His foes joined him because he was becoming powerful.
If we don't join him, he will attack us.
Yeah, he is too strong now.
Tabari says Khalid ibn Walid and Amr ibn al-Ash were enemies of Islam and fought against Muslims. They converted when they saw Prophet Muhammad was becoming victorious. Arabs saw that those who converted to Islam had been enriched. All their earning came from robbery. But it was a robbery sanctioned by God. In their primitive way of thinking, that was an indication that God was behind Prophet Muhammad. Muslim sense of morality has not evolved since the time of Muhammad. This primitive way of thinking of Arabs that believes might is right has spread to all Muslim countries. Once controlled under Islam, the Muslims would undergo a brainwashing system from childhood until adulthood. This system programs them to reduce their sense of morality and justice to be as primitive as their prophets. The great Persian historian, Muhammad ibn Jarir Tabari, narrates Prophet Muhammad's crimes in detail, describing his treacheries, robberies, rapes, assassinations, and murders to the extent that the reader feels nauseated.
Although I'm a highly learned man, I'm unable to see that the founder of that much evil cannot be a prophet of God.
One of the greatest geniuses that ever lived was Jalaluddin Rumi. Despite all his talent, he too is incapable of seeing the man he calls his prophet was a thug.
That's true. I even believe in Muhammad's nonsense that God transformed the Jews into pigs and monkeys when they broke the law of Sabbath.
This is what evil ideology does to people. Smart people abdicate their intelligence when they believe. And as Voltaire says, when people believe in absurdities, they can commit atrocities. Any sane person can understand that raiding someone's home, killing him, and robbing his belonging is wrong. It does not require a lot of intelligence to understand this much. Yet amazingly, 1.7 billion Muslims, among them many educated people, are unable to see that. Prophet Muhammad has even a surah in the Quran describing how the stolen property should be divided. Surah Al-Anfal was written after the Badr robbery. It starts by saying, "They ask you, O Muhammad, about the spoils of war. Say, the spoils of war belong to Allah and the Messenger." Here, Prophet Muhammad makes the maker of the universe a partner in his crime. Anyone with a brain the size of that of a cat knows that God has no use for the stolen belongings of a bunch of Arabs. All that spoil went to Prophet Muhammad, so why defile the name of God? The real translation of this verse is, "The stolen property belongs to me and myself." Muhammad did not believe in God. He used him as a tool to fool people. If he really believed in God, he would not have dared to attribute so many lies to him. Sahih Bukhari, Volume 4, page 108, Hadith number 88. Narrated Ibn Umar that the Prophet said, "My livelihood is under the shade of my spear, and he who disobeys my orders will be humiliated by paying jizya." The virtue of the spear has been mentioned in this hadith, and we have been informed that the livelihood and provision of the Prophet lies in the spear to gain war booty. This is why the Muhaddithin or hadith collector has stated that
The best earning is that of war booty. It is clearly proven by this hadith that booty has been made permissible for the Muslim Ummah.
the hadith sums up the morality of Muslims. It say Muhammad earned his livelihood through robbery. As the result, Muslim scholars and muhaddithins have concluded
Booty is permissible and the best earning is the one that comes from robbery.
Yes, but nowadays, the obligation of jihad has been forgotten, and we cannot earn our livelihood anymore by plundering and forcing the non-Muslims to pay jizya.
The irony is that in Islam, theft is prohibited, and the punishment of the thief is chopping his hand for the first offense, and then amputation of other limbs for subsequent offenses. But that is when the thief steals from a Muslim. When the victim is a non-Muslim, there is no punishment. Such thefts are regulated and encouraged. In the raid at Wadi al-Qura, right after the raid of Khaybar, a stray arrow killed a slave of Prophet Muhammad. Muslims gathered around him and congratulated him for attaining the paradise.
Good luck to him. He will go to the garden.
But the Prophet said,
Certainly not. His cloak is even burning on him in hell now. He had stolen the cloak he was wearing from the spoils of the Muslims.
When the people heard that, a man brought 2 sandal straps to the messenger of Allah and said,
Rasulullah, I had no shoes, so I took this pair of sandal from the man I killed.
You will be burned in hell for stealing those sandals. Whatever is taken as spoil must be put in a pool and divided as Allah has ordained. 1/5 belongs to Allah and His Messenger, or me and myself, and the rest shall be divided among the raiders. The one with a horse gets 3 shares, the one on foot gets 1 share.
Do you see the irony? The Muslims attacked infidels and gathered the spoils to distribute among Muslims. These 2 Muslims will go to hell because they stole a cloak and a pair of sandals from the spoils, but the spoil itself is lawful and the best way of earning a living. Even though Prophet Muhammad prohibited Muslims stealing from the spoils before he got his lion's share, he openly stole from his followers. Right after Khaybar was conquered, Prophet Muhammad set his eyes on the Jewish city of Fadak, which was the most fertile land in Arabia. The population of Fadak, assessing their prospect, decided to surrender. They sent a delegation to Muhammad while he was still in Khaybar, telling him that,
We will abandon our town in exchange for our lives.
Okay, but I will allow you to stay if you give me 50% of what you produce to me.
I accept your offer.
Fadak is my personal property because Muslims did not fight there.
the reason these Jews surrendered was obviously because of Prophet Muhammad's army. Without that army, would they have surrendered to one man? He took 20% of every plunder, without ever fighting personally or putting his life in danger. But he kept the entire wealth of Fadak to himself, because the populations of this town surrendered without a fight. He did the same with the land of the Jewish Banu Nadir in Medina. It is not that his followers were as dumb as not to notice, but that they were afraid to question him.
I do what I please, and no one dares to argue with me. For Muslims, arguing with me is equal to arguing with God.
That is what prevents Muslims from questioning Islam, since the Prophet's era up to today.